Hi, my name is Darlene Pollock, also known as the Darling Princess. That's my education company. My story usually starts like everybody else's story, except that I like to start it before. My mom was 15 years old the first time my biological father raped her. And somehow she just decided that we were in it together and we were going to get through this, and she married him, thinking that things were going to change. He'd apologized or whatever, and yet it didn't change. He brutalized her for 2 more years. On the verge of suicide, she called her mom and she said, "You gotta get me out of here." So we went to live with my grandmother. But for reasons I'll never fully understand, we were still sent back to visit with my paternal grandmother, giving my biological father access to my sister and myself. We were molested and sexually abused every other weekend for years and years. And we were taught very carefully to be silent about it, and so I had no voice. My mom used to say, I would pick you up and you didn't talk. You wouldn't say anything for days sometimes. And I realized that that was what kept me safe, was not talking. As I grew, my mom got married and divorced again, and I was a latchkey kid at home. This big, brawny bodybuilder came to my neighborhood one time, said he was looking for a friend of his. And he was just so jovial and friendly with all of the kids in the neighborhood. And I just was really friendly back. And so were the other kids, and he'd come around all the time. And after a while, we live in New England and it would get cold. And it wasn't long before I was in his car. And shortly after that, I was in his bed. I was 13. For about 9 months, he groomed me, and he made me feel like he was my friend, and he said that I could get the things that I needed because we were very poor. It was in the 1980s and everything was gray. The mill buildings in the city where I lived were all broken. The glass was everywhere we used to walk through, and the paint was peeling in every house that I was around. And so I didn't have boots, for example, in the wintertime. And he was able to convince me that there was a way that I could get money, but I said, no, I don't need any of that. I was fighting with my mom all the time. The trauma from my early childhood was coming forth, and I was just being terrible. I was, stealing from the neighbors and stealing from her and throwing the furniture around in fits of rage. I didn't know what was going on really, and neither did she. But on my 14th birthday, she came home from running some errands, and I was, in the moment, as any 14-year-old is, no thought of the future or even the past. It was my birthday. So I said, "Mom, it's my birthday." And she gave me a dirty look, and she said, "Here," as she threw 2 crumpled up dollar bills on the table. And I was devastated, absolutely devastated. I couldn't believe that that was my birthday. 2 crumpled up dollar bills, nothing else. So I called that man. He had given me his phone number. He had not asked for mine. He was not pushy. He made me think that this was my decision. So he sold me that day to a small businessman from southern New Hampshire for sex. He sold me hundreds and hundreds more times. But that day, as I stood in the slush, my birthday's in the wintertime, with the slush coming up just over my sneakers, I looked around and I wondered, can anyone see me? Is there anyone who can see me? That trafficker saw me. He picked me up and I got in his car and he sold me, as I said. And I went on to have other pimps. One was violent. One used drugs to manipulate me and to keep me sedated, basically. And then at 17 and a half, I was sold to one man as a so-called house pet. He put me in an apartment and I got a little job at a pizza store. And my life started to calm down. There were no more rapes, no more beatings, no more sleeping out on the streets in winter, no more going days without food. There would be no more weeks that I didn't have a bed or a couch to sleep on. No more going months without knowing if anyone cared if I was dead or alive. I knew that I was his servant and that he didn't care about me as a person, but It was a place that I could go to. I even got a kitten and some pans. I didn't know how to use them, but I started to feel like a person. And then I got pregnant. And he told me that if I got pregnant, I'd have to have an abortion, but it had been 5 years of being passed around. I didn't think I would get pregnant. I threw myself at his feet. I begged him, please let me go. I promise I won't tell anyone. He slammed the wooden arm of the couch. I want no life, he said, and it shot through me like a bolt of lightning. I was on my feet with my mouth open, standing there thinking, oh my God, how did I get here? He was gonna kill me if I didn't have an abortion. He was connected with underground crime. I met him through the first pimp that I had. The first pimp was a bouncer at his illegal gambling establishment, but he'd also brought me to places that were detectives' homes, and he knew the city councilman. I felt like he was connected with the real world and with the underworld. I didn't think I had any place to go. So I made the appointment by phone in his presence, and somehow I fell asleep that night through my sobs, and I had a dream of the abortion procedure in living color from the perspective of the womb. Now, I had left school in the 7th grade. I had no biology. I had no understanding, but I saw those stubby little fingers. I saw half a face. I saw a little rib cage. And I woke up and start, my hands in the air, and I literally looked at my hands on either side of me, and I said, God, if you're real, I need you to show up. I need you to show up right now. I'm gonna die. I'm not doing that. I'm going to die. I'm going to let him kill me first. I can't do that. I can't. And I remembered a social worker who had been a key tracker, meaning she would go out and find me when I was runaway. Her name was Anthony, and I called her at the Department of Health and Human Services, and she wasn't there anymore, but they could hear the desperation in my voice. She called me back, and in no time we made plans. I had to go out to dinner with him the night after the procedure was supposed to have happened. I would put all my stuff in storage, and she was going to find a home for me to go, a safe house. So I did. I stood there, trembling as he came to the door. That night, he didn't even take his coat off as he entered. "You're ready?" he said. I scrambled for my coat. I still didn't know. Had he followed me? Did he know? Was he taking me now to be killed? I had no idea. I got in the car and we drove down to Boston, an hour and 15 minutes. And all the way I made up a story. My cousin has a diner up in New Hampshire and she's gonna give me a job, and could he please let me go? I didn't want to do this anymore. I couldn't do this anymore. And he hardly said a word all the way. I didn't know still, but we got to the restaurant and I pushed my food around and I pretended to have had the abortion. I was in pain and he gave me painkillers, big red painkillers, and I took them. I went to the bathroom frequently, and in the bathroom I prayed, God, you protected me apparently so far. Please protect the baby from these pills. I didn't know what they were, but I had taken them. I didn't know if they were gonna hurt the baby or what. But I got back in the car, and on the way home he said, okay, I'm going to let you go, but if you come back to this city, you're mine. And I still was really unsure. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should say thank you or just be silent. Silence had worked for me so many times before, I just didn't say anything. I got into the house and looked around, and sure enough, nobody was there. For 12 or so years, I thought that the violent pimp that I had known that was his flunky was gonna kill me. He was gonna come after me and kill me, for sure. I was always looking over my shoulder, but I was always quiet. I didn't say anything to anyone. I never told people what happened to me. Shortly after my baby was born, my grandmother answered an ad in the Singles Almanac. It was the Match.com at the time on paper. And it was a whole story in and of itself, but I ended up marrying him. And he's such a wonderful man. And he went through so much with me because I was so traumatized. But he stuck through it. He stuck it out. And I can't tell you now, after almost 29 years, the incredible amount of ups and downs and ins and outs and so much we've been through. We have 5 wonderful children. They're all grown. We have 2 grandchildren. But my story is that bad beginnings do not necessitate bad endings. And if you know someone who's pregnant by rape, know this: saving my baby saved my life. And maybe it would be the same for that girl. There is no reason to have abortion in case of rape. Those children are often the deliverers of women who are suffering from sexual abuse and sexual violence. God has a plan. He restores, He refreshes, and He brings joy. That's the message of my life. It's the story of redemption from beginning to end, and I'm not finished yet. Thank you for listening.